Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about BlacKkKlansman. I think when you get towards the latter half of any director's filmography, you get to a point where most great filmmakers who get to have a lengthy filmography, there's always a film where you feel like they knew enough to competently make a decent movie. To make a movie that's just a home run that's like pretty much feels like it's like an easy thing for them to do. It's still something you find really entertaining. I wouldn't say complacent, but just like know how to do these kind of studio films the way they're supposed to do them, and having all those things under the surface that you can read into. That is not motherfucking Spike Lee. Spike Lee manages to make one of his most Hollywood kind of studio feeling movies that's like fun, a funny concept, the idea of a black man calling the Ku Klux Klan, infiltrating them, having a white guy come into the Ku Klux Klan and like be his double so he could meet with them, and it's a laughable, fun story. If you heard that even on a news magazine, you'd watch that story. That's how did this happen? It's like beyond belief. That is interesting, and he's able to use that story, and that's funny. There's a lot of funny things, there's a lot you can say with just that thing. Spike Lee does that, but he manages to put enough between it where you're both making fun of the Ku Klux Klan, understanding that they're a threat, understanding that they do kill people, understanding that they're a serious threat. I mean, they do a lot of horrible things, as well as understanding that this guy infiltrated them and made them look like fools. And there's not a lot of directors who can do that. I think this is almost a story that would play under most directors as a comedy. It's silly. It is silly. This movie can be very funny. You've seen the part in the trailer where he's saying like how he hates blacks and stuff. That's very funny, okay? But he doesn't want the Klan, or the organization as they're called or whatever. I like that they had a different rebranding in the 70s. They weren't just like the alt-right. They're, the organization. That he's able to take something that if you edited just some parts at the beginning and the end out and certain scenes, you could make this, perfect for syndicated TV, but it would take all the punch out of it. And that's what makes this film kind of remarkable, because it's like Spike Lee, he knows how to tell a story. He knew to rely on this true life story and make this true life story into a really fun, entertaining, interesting film, but he was able to make it say more, cross-cutting, doing things he's done before, but not getting too weird, almost like taking on things and understanding his sense with those scenes, making one of his more purposeful, interesting films he has in a while. I didn't see Chirac, in all fairness. At the same time, this made me really kind of invigorated by Spike Lee in a way I haven't in a while. It feels very much like kind of a fall kind of studio movie, but it doesn't feel like completely a studio film. It doesn't feel like Spike Lee sold out or something, if that still means anything nowadays, or that he compromised himself, or he didn't go as far in this film. He really does go as far as he needs to. It might feel like maybe this film should have ended earlier. It might feel like maybe this film is too long or something, which I would agree with, but I think what this film is saying about the Klan and understanding how it is really funny and it is an interesting story, but he doesn't let go of the fact that these people are fucking terrorists. It's both like you hear this story and you're like, that's outrageous. How did they trick them? They're so stupid. But at the same time, it's like, they're stupid, but they could potentially kill you and destroy you. And that is really some powerful filmmaking. And I think BlacKkKlansman, plays in a way that plays kind of like an easy kind of rental thing. Oh, that's a funny premise. But he is able to kind of elevate this material in ways that makes you go, oh yeah, that is Spike Lee. That's why he's an important filmmaker, because he can make you walk away, and at first during the film you think, oh, this is a fun movie, it's about these things and I enjoy do the right thing and I'm having a good time with all these characters, and then he'll really hit you hard and leave you with a complicated, complex argument, and you're thinking about it and thinking about all the different facets of it and how he's able to show life in such a way, gives you that knot in your stomach, makes you leaving the theater and thinking. And that's what I've always liked about Spike Lee. Now, I'm not saying every film in his filmography works. I don't think that at all. But I think the ones that really hit you, that really work, whether it's Do the Right Thing, whether it's Malcolm X, whether it's When the Levees Broke, Inside Man, when I've left those films, I am thinking about ideas. I am thinking about how he did that and how he made much more fleshed out argument than the type of film that you thought that film was when you started it. He takes you on a journey, and when he does that well, which he does here, it hits you and it impacts you. What makes this film maybe elevated to people is it gives you that feeling, that gut feeling that a good Spike Lee movie does. It makes you think about things. It makes you think about how smart and interesting and interpretive Spike Lee has always been. And taking this true life story, which honestly doesn't feel like a huge story, but what it represents and the observations from it speak volumes. There's some times where, like, yes, he's not subtle and he's like bringing up things that, like, sure, people in the past said that might sound a little ridiculous and like, we'll never elect a racist president or something. I'm like, I mean, you probably already did elect a racist president at this point, but you know, whatever. I get who you're talking about. And his use of other footage and stuff, which he doesn't do too much. The arty kind of weirder side of Spike Lee pokes its head out a lot, but it doesn't overdo it. Like, this is one of his more mainstream films in a long time, but he's still Spike Lee. It's interesting as an auteur. I think what Spike Lee does is he has so much of an autorial voice that he kind of can't not let it go. And this one feels like the Spike Lee we know and love. This isn't like the old boy kind of crap Spike Lee, which nobody really wanted that. This reminds me of the classic 80s and 90s heyday of Spike Lee, and that is really, really wonderful. The two leads, one of which, who I didn't realize embarrassingly, that John David Washington is Denzel Washington's son, which I think is kind of interesting that, you know, since Spike Lee has quite a reputation with Denzel Washington, it's kind of cool to see his son in a Spike Lee movie. His film debut was actually in a Spike Lee movie, which was Malcolm X, but I think that's kind of like a nice, like, full circle thing. I think that's actually really cool. I didn't really notice any Denzel-isms, but it seems like everyone else was looking for those when I read about that, and I just, like, seriously wasn't. Mostly because I didn't know. Adam Driver continues to be such an interesting actor, floating between, like, indie kind of big auteur stuff and, you know, Star Wars movies. He does a really good work with Spike Lee. I think he's able to show that certainly he's not the focus of this film, he's not the lead of this film, but he does a lot with the few scenes he's in, kind of showing like how he's scared too, because he's actually Jewish. There's one scene that I found really interesting, and it's not really giving anything away, so I'm not going to do a spoiler section, but they're at a gun range, like kind of in the woods or something, and you just see them shooting the guns. You don't see what they're shooting at. You assume it's targets because you're like, they have guns, so I guess that's what they're doing. And then they leave, and you see the character of Ron Stallworth, and he walks out. And at first you're like, that's weird that he was so close, but like, whatever. And then he goes and walks up, and you see the targets, and they're like caricatures, racist caricatures, of course, of black people. And I think that makes you go, oh right, these are buffoons, these guys are silly, they're like dumb rednecks or whatever. But their main goal is to like hurt and maim and kill black people. It's not like they're just saying racist names and so forth, which is still obviously very bad, but the fact that they're actually going out and destroying families and killing people. There's a bunch of scenes where it might feel a little heavy-handed, kind of reminds you like, hey, this is like what's at stake here, because having just a fun comedy, if you gave this to a comedy director, you would not have those scenes. But this film has an impact, because that's a scene that I'm like, whoa, right, they are racist. Not that I forgot the Klan was racist. It's like one of those things you don't forget. But like, it just hits you in a way that reminds you of like, hey, this is what these people are doing. They're palling around and shooting these kind of targets. That's the world we're in right now. And it examines, I think, the various different plot lines, which sometimes Spike Lee can get more messy with. I think like earlier Spike Lee was more like something like What's Sorry to Bother You was, or something, where it's like we want to do all these movies, and Spike Lee was very much purposely telling one movie. He wasn't very too far off. The Ron Stallworth character, when he starts going out with this like younger woman who runs the Black Student Union, and how she views cops and how he views cops, how she's not sure she can trust him in the debates over that, and being black in America, and particularly in this Colorado Springs area. It plays like a good, subtler kind of August, September movie that, you know, later you're like, oh, we should check that out again. That was a cool, modest film. But it's like Spike Lee won't let that happen. Like, he's too understands what all this means, what the reality of this is, and he can't let that go. One of the great things about Spike Lee is that he couldn't let that go, because if any other older director did this, it wouldn't be as interesting. And if you cut news footage out and everything like that, this film wouldn't be the kind of film it was. And to me, that's not the point of this movie. This film is a point of itself as a whole, and it brings up a lot of the troubling facts and what these guys were actually doing. You know, it's funny, it's cool that they did it, I think most people recognize it, but when it really hits you, there's a scene where Harry Belafonte is talking about a lynching, how horrific it was, while they're showing people being inducted into the Ku Klux Klan, which might be a little heavy-handed, but really brought up the issues with it. But I think this also kind of shows, you know, you're being very serious, but you're also showing the real comedy of Spike Lee. He's a really entertaining kind of guy. I think it's kind of a shame we don't get more like sort of mainstream movies from him, as much as he can do that. But this, which is produced by Jason Blum of Blumhouse, and Jordan Peele is a producer as well. This is probably one of his first mainstream kind of wide release movies in quite a while. This is like as much of a compromise of like letting this film be the vision it is, and like for people to see it, while also this being like kind of artier Spike Lee and so forth. It doesn't go too much in the Spike Lee-isms till more towards the end, when the two characters are kind of gliding on a thing and so forth. This is unmistakably Spike Lee, and I think it's definitely one in his filmography I want to actually watch again. It had you deal with a lot of difficult things, particularly what happened in Charlottesville, which this film comes out around I guess iffy a year anniversary of that, and he purposefully says he did that. I think this film plays at the right time in the summer for people to really deal with this movie and deal with what it's saying. And I don't think it's like Spike Lee making like this weird art thing that like me and 10 people will see and we'll all agree with. This is like kind of combating you more and kind of like bringing up all the many facets of this. And I could see someone who disagrees with this liking this movie and not really having a problem with it. Spike Lee is very much a master type of filmmaker, and this is what a master filmmaker brings you with kind of such more of a simplistic, like paint by the numbers, get a paycheck kind of a script. You have the concept there, people are gonna love it, it's like whatever, might as well like have some fun with it, and boy, he really did. I really like BlacKkKlansman. I like where it went. It was probably one of the more interesting, inquisitive mainstream movies I've seen all summer, and it's one that made me thinking about various things and thinking about how well he was able to kind of weave and get all these things in a movie and play them off very well. I don't necessarily think this is a perfect film, but it's just that it's so much better than a lot of his recent stuff, that he's kind of feels a little reborn as kind of like this interesting studio director that can tell kind of a funny story, but can also leave you, you know, feeling uncomfortable and sad and worried about the fate of the world. There's not a lot of directors that can do all those things in an over 2-hour movie, I guess. But Spike Lee is definitely one of them, and definitely amazing at it. And I am very happy to have seen this film, and I love how much it like pokes holes in the Ku Klux Klan while also fearing them and understanding that they are terrorists and that they are very evil. And he kind of like doesn't let go of his portrayal of how evil these people were, how stupid they were, but also how life was going on and the complexity of life and the complexity of ideas of life. Spike Lee will never let go, and that's what makes Spike Lee such a one-of-a-kind director. It makes his films unique, the Spike Lee joints, as they're lovingly called. And I think BlacKkKlansman goes in line with the tradition of Spike Lee, but almost like lets him come to the mainstream table while also like demanding that you care about what's going on and how these ramifications are still going on today. And there's not a lot of mainstream movies that really make you think and make you uncomfortable by the politics of today as much as BlacKkKlansman does. That is really kind of the biggest achievement of this, is you have such a well-rounded experience while you're still thinking about all the various things within it. I think BlacKkKlansman is probably one of the more interesting, thought-provoking, and uncomfortable mainstream films that we'll probably see in quite a while, and that's a really awesome thing. So if you have seen BlacKkKlansman and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.